Hello everyone and welcome back to that one playthrough of Kerbal's Space Program. I am Kyle once again, and you join us here at the KSC, right where we left off before. Only this time, we've got 3 rockets ready to go. I have the Imprint 2, I have the Companion 1, and the Kerbal Planetary Observatory. And we're going to take all 3 of these rockets and launch them today. Each one has a very important task of its own. The Imprint 2 is obviously the exact same thing as the Imprint 1. The Companion 1, however, is actually the successor to the Adventurer series. So this will have actually 2 Kerbals on it instead of just one, so we'll actually be able to improve the rank of our scientists and our engineers moving forward. But we're going to go ahead and move forward with the Imprint 2. Now this is an exact replica of the same rocket that we just took to the moon in the last episode, the same probe. We're going to go ahead and launch this. Everything's exactly identical. So there's not really anything else to add to this. It was a pretty smooth, uninteresting launch for the most part. That's why this is sped up so substantially. But nonetheless, I just wanted to make sure everyone could see that this bad boy gets to orbit. I will go ahead and confess to the downside to this story moving forward. I did not have footage of it landing on the moon because somebody who was in charge of the recording did not press the record button. I wonder who that could have been. Kyle. Yes. Anyways, yeah, I still kept a lot of the same flaws, not intentionally, but this still only has 1 solar panel. It did make it fairly comfortably, though, all the way to the surface of the moon once again, just in a slightly, unvisualized way, because we're not going to be able to watch it again. So I take this up to a nice easy parking orbit, and then we're going to go ahead and send it on its way here in just a second. We'll end up getting a maneuver node. Now, one thing to think about with this is I wanted there to be multiple moon probes that landed, and I was going to have that in one vehicle. Unfortunately, I found that it was actually easier to just do this and land a second probe by itself, because I don't have a rocket that's quite big enough to launch, say, 4 of these all at once. Obviously, that kind of sucks, because we could have gotten a ton of science all in one go, but nonetheless, this guy does his job fairly well. Go ahead and send it out there, get it lined up here with a nice, easy maneuver node. Did a bit of finagling to get in the right spot, but eventually found a good location to line up for a flyby of the moon. We'll go ahead and get over to that maneuver node. It was fairly easy. But yeah, so the good news is that this gets on the moon, and what I was actually able to do, and I'll show you some pictures at the end here, or at least one picture of where it actually landed. I was able to actually hop this, so I landed it once, grabbed science, and then I was able to take it all the way to another biome because I was very close to where the 2 biomes actually kind of not overlapped, but where they kind of met. So I was able to get a hop out of this because it had enough delta V, which allowed us to get another batch of science from another biome, and because of the strategies we have in place, I was actually able to get another set of 15,000 credits for no additional effort other than just getting this thing to hop and land somewhere else. So it's on its way to the moon. And as promised, here's a picture of that landing on the moon. You'll notice that the moon actually looks a lot crisper, a lot cleaner, a lot more rocks and stuff. I added the Parallax 2 mod, so we've got a little bit better visuals on each of the planets too. But this was done on the midlands, I believe, and then the secondary landing was on the highlands, or it could have been vice versa. It might have been highlands into lowlands, but I got a hop in it, so we got 2 biomes, double the science output out of this one, so a super successful mission. Then we'll go ahead and move over to the Companion 1. As I said, this is a successor to the Adventurer series. It's the exact same rocket, except I replaced that module on top that holds the Kerbals. It now holds 2 rather than the 1 previously, so now we have 2 Kerbals in place. And Valentina ends up I believe this is the video where she ends up pulling off a substantial trick here. It's pretty impressive. Yeah, we end up getting another little faulty fuel tank, which turns into an issue here because that side burns out faster, and she pulls off the Kerbal world's first ever 360 no-scope into orbit. So yeah, somehow that worked. We were in a high enough we're high enough in the atmosphere that the air resistant wasn't problematic, and we were able to ditch the boosters, get that core stage going again, and just kind of coast it up there nonchalantly. It was a little stressful at the time, but I just kind of waited it out to see what happened before I worried about aborting. And they get to orbit pretty easily, even with that crazy experience they just had there. And yeah, so Bill, our engineer, is going to end up grabbing some experience. He's going to be the third Kerbal in our space program to make it to rank 1. And from then, he will be a far more effective engineer moving forward, as we're getting all these Kerbals prepped and ready to go to start our moon program, because we're going to want them to have experience and some better safety ratings on all fronts. So scientists collect more data. Our pilots are going to be able to have a little bit more control. You can see we've got prograde and retrograde markers on the control markers for the SAS module. And then our engineers should be able to repair things if there's issues in space. Because what I'd like to do is have our first flybys of the moon and our first orbits have 3 Kerbals. So I have a pilot, an engineer, and a scientist, so that all those bases are covered. Bill goes ahead and does a little EVA here. Get some experience outside of the cockpit in space. I have him go and gather the science. I don't really think there was very much, but I had him collect it nonetheless. You know, 0.2 science here and there can add up and sometimes be effective. I don't think I had them stay up here in orbit too long, but yeah, they're going to gain some experience. I want to go ahead and set an alarm here. Make sure that we can test out our food supplies and how that all works. You can see delta V-wise, there's still quite a bit in this vehicle too. So we'll have to make upgrades going into the future to get this to be able to do a moon flyby. The amount of delta V required is going to be substantially higher. So the entire booster phase, not just adding more side boosters, but I think the entire kind of initial stage is going to have to be substantially bigger. More rockets on the bottom, whether that's multiple Kodiaks or just a totally different engine to begin with, I'm not really sure. What I tried to do here is actually line this up so that we would land in a new biome. So I kind of fire this with the hopes that we're going to land in the desert. This does 2 things, really. 1, we'll be able to gather science from the desert. And 2, because it's a new biome, we should actually collect a little bit of additional cash for doing that. So get this lined up, make that burn, and then just coast it on in here. They seem to be having a good time. Valentina is looking excited. I think Bill's excited. I can't tell if he's smiling or if he's screaming his head off in fear. Either way, we're gonna head back to Kerbin. Yeah, still checking kind of the heat and everything on these two, because I wasn't quite sure with this bigger command pod if we were going to have any issues on reheating it. It did just fine. I don't even think it burned through that much of the ablator. And that's something moving forward too, as we return from moon flybys, moon orbits, whether or not these ablators are going to be enough. They might be. They might not be. I'm not exactly sure. So we might send the first command pod to a flyby of the moon completely empty, just because I don't want to kill anybody. As much as some of you may want to see me kill some Kerbals, I'm trying to avoid it, because they are expensive. And then we safely land back into the desert, just as I had hoped. Good sight about this, as I said previously, is we're going to be able to go in here, collect some science. I do a little EVA report, as well as the crew report from inside the cockpit. Snag those real quick. And then get Bill back on board. Nice. Okay, maybe that was Valentina. I don't remember who I had go outside of it. Anyways, moving right along into the next rocket. This is the Kerbal Planetary Observatory launch. A very prominent launch for the Kerbal race as a whole in their scientific endeavors to explore the rest of their solar system. You see, in the mod set that I have for research bodies, I can't really go to any locations I have not discovered. So we need to use this satellite telescope, that's what it's called, to actively find these bodies. And, well, I had some issues here again with a fuel tank burning out too quickly because it emptied, and it caused some serious issues once again. And when I detached it while it was still burning, I turned our orbital telescope into an atmospheric telescope accidentally. And you can imagine that this will, it will not stay at this altitude for very long. So it became quite a problem. that we must move on from. Please change the clip. Please, thank you. So we'll do it again. Yeah, this time around, same launch. Hopefully we don't have any issues, and I know we don't because I'm commentating this in post-production. You notice this did have to have a couple extra boosters on the side just to make sure we had that initial lift off the pad. This was a much bigger satellite than anything else we put into orbit, so it took quite a bit of oomph to get it all the way there. But this goes a lot smoother. Ditch those side boosters. The rest of these I kind of power up the side boosters a little bit earlier. Make sure we've got enough lift to keep going here. No issues with the fuel tanks themselves. Overall, much better. Now, to kind of talk a little bit about the Research Bodies mod, essentially this telescope comes with the mod. Put the telescope into orbit. You might be able to use it from the surface of Kerbin. I'm not really sure. I didn't try to experiment with that, but it's much easier to aim when you're in orbit, and you can kind of just float around and point it whatever direction you want. But once it's up there, essentially you just point it in a direction, and you have it start to try and look for stuff. And then when it finds stuff, it'll say, hey, you've discovered X planet, X moon, whatever it is. And that's what I end up doing once we get this up here, so... Pretty normal launch, nothing out of the ordinary again happens. Nice and smooth, get rid of the fairing, first stage goes bye-bye, and there it is. There's our big, giant telescope. Get the solar panels opened up here. I put some extra solar panels on the actual telescope itself just to make sure we'd always have enough power. And this was kind of a lumbering satellite. It's got a lot of weight to it, so it took quite a bit of the fuel in this kick stage here, this secondary stage, to get it all the way up. We burn through this entirely. And then there's a smaller stage, kind of just attached to the telescope itself, that's going to get us fully to orbit, as well as give us some maneuvering capabilities. Not that we'll ever really need it, because the altitude of this isn't going to decay, and it's not something we need to change over time. But this is probably looking like one of the last launches we're going to get out of the Brightwood rocket, because as we start to build bigger vehicles to go further, bigger satellites to go further, you can tell that this is kind of the limitations here. We're going to burn this stage pretty low, and it's not going to get much further than here with the Delta V that's left, but it's in a nice, stable, comfortable orbit around Kerbin. So I go ahead and kind of drift it around here a little bit, and then open up kind of the capabilities within the mod itself. And what you'll notice here is I'm looking at where the planetary bodies are just by eyeballing them, because with the not just research bodies, but the visual enhancement mods, you can actively see the planets kind of glowing out in the distance. So you point it that direction, and then you have it track bodies, and you keep hitting that, and eventually it'll tell you that you've discovered something. So I think we just discovered Duna, which is good, because now we can start to actively send stuff there if we want to. There's two ways to actively research things to become more familiar with the planets. Now, on one side, you can go into the Observatory Tracking Station, which is a new building the mod brings into the KSC, and from there, you can actively spend money. Now, that sounds like it'd be easy, but it's like 350,000 Kerbal dollars or whatever in order to just get 10% of the research done. Or you can just send satellites there, and as you send more and more satellites and do more and more discoveries live, then you discover more information about the planet as well. So what I'll probably end up doing as I go through here, and we discover Ike, we discover Lindor. Lindor is one of the new planets with the actual JNSQ mod. You discover all of their moons, which is useful. We get Joule in the mix here as well. So as I go through here, you'll notice the little windows that keep popping up just tell me that we're actively discovering stuff. And what I didn't notice either until probably halfway through this is every time I discovered one of these planets or moons, I was getting 40 science for it, which I didn't anticipate, but is kind of awesome. And I end up getting to spend that in the end of this, which is fantastic. You'll see I just kind of noticed there, I pointed up toward the science of it. We're at 327 currently, which is massive. Truly helps us actually going into the next couple of episodes, because we will be able to have better rockets, better usage of everything that's available to us. So I go through here and I think I discover most of the planets. There's a couple that I won't be able to discover with this because they're just so far away. They don't actively show up anywhere in the sky, and they are some of the further away ones, like Nara, I believe, with the JNSQ mod. So we'll have to actively utilize the observatory on Kerbin to eventually research and find those, but that's okay. There's a way to do that in the actual contracts mechanism that's built in with the mod as well. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get the rest of these. I think Jewel and all of its moons are coming up here at the moment. And once we get all those, we'll head back to the KSC and go to the R&D lab. Now, as I said, this gets us some substantial improvements, and I'll kind of go through briefly what each one of those are in the R&D lab itself, but we're going to have better vacuum engines, better accessibility to mechanisms like life support, as well as some smaller science tools that we'll use on kind of these initial lunar flybys with our manned crews that will be coming up. So let's go ahead and return to the KSC, and we'll head into the R&D building first. So what I ended up doing was just kind of going through, kind of finding the most important ones. Landing material, airstream protective shell, I thought was pretty good, but maybe I picked that up later. I think what I ended up finding out was I just grabbed what I thought was most important. So we got the 3-person command pod. I'm going to go ahead and grab there eventually. I ended up getting everything, I think, in the 90 science tier. So there's really nothing to worry about on that side of things. More than anything, it's just going to take time, obviously, to research these as time goes by. So this ends up being a pretty quick episode, just kind of setting the stage for a few things. We've got some planets discovered through our new telescope. We've got a bunch of science that we're going to research and unlock to help with some better probe technologies, as well as our lunar exploration with our crewed vehicles. But, you know, until next time, I think this is probably about it. This is me discovering that it costs a ton of money, actually, to research each one of these individually. So we're going to send some probes to Duna and Eve first, I think, coming up, as well as prepare again for those lunar expeditions. But until next time, I'm Kyle. This has been That One playthrough of Kerbal Space Program, and I hope to see you in another episode. Have a wonderful day.